Well, welcome everybody to the Lehigh County Authority meeting of September 23rd, 2024. Meeting is being recorded. The information was sent out in advance to the board of directors, so through email as well as online and park shop. Let's have a roll call of the board of directors. Make sure we have a quorum.
You got it. Roll call of the board. Brian Noggle.
Here.
Amir Famili.
Here.
Ted Lyons.
Here.
Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Norma Cusick.
Here.
Kevin Baker. Linda Rosenfeld. Here. Sean Ziller.
I am here.
Mark Ramus. And we have 7 board members present, so we do have a quorum.
Okay. Let's begin with a review of the agenda and any need for executive sessions.
Today, keep it easy. No changes, no executive sessions.
Good. Yeah. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes from September 9th, 2024 board meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That would be you.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes as provided in the packet. Second.
Motion made by Jeff and seconded by Linda for approval as presented. Are there any questions?
I will, it's Sean. I'll be abstaining from the vote.
So will Ted.
All right, 2 abstentions. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. At this point, we open up the floor to any comments from the public on the non-agenda items. Do we have any comments?
No, thanks, Brian.
No, thanks.
Nice to see you, Jenny and Brian. Well, we see your names. Moving on then to action discussion items. We have 3 under finance and administration. Penvest financial resolutions, lead service line replacement cycle 1 project seeking approval. It is blue documents within our board package. Digital board packet pages 7 to 18.
All right, and I'll tee this up quickly, but we have Erica Weibel from
Yep, that's correct.
Louise, Wallace and Nurick in to walk through these with us. As you may recall, we applied for and received funding through Penvest for our lead service line replacement project cycle 1. We are moving toward closing on the loan portion of that funding in the November timeframe. And in order for us to do that, we need to have a couple of key resolutions adopted by the board to cover some things that Penvest is looking for. Kevin Reed, our solicitor, worked with Erica to make sure all the right words are in place here, and I'll turn it to Erica to review the 3 resolutions.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So there are 3 resolutions in front of you, each of which has been prepared by McNeese in consultation with your solicitor, all in connection with the Penvest loan and grant. So I'll start with resolution 9-2024-1, which is the borrower resolution. And this resolution does a couple things that I just want to highlight. The first is it does authorize the authority to accept a grant from Penvest in the maximum principal amount of $3,383,892. The second is it authorizes the authority to obtain a loan from Penvest in the maximum principal amount of $1,555,508. In connection with that loan, the resolution does specifically authorize the authority to issue its subordinate lien, sewer, and water revenue bond series of 2024 to evidence the loan. The proceeds of the loan and the grant will be used by the authority to finance the replacement of lead service lines of the Allentown water plant and distribution system and to pay costs related to the Penvest financing. Per the Penvest requirements, and as discussed on pages 2 and 3 of the resolution, the repayment of the Penvest loan is secured by a subordinate lien of the concession revenues as well as a 1-year debt service reserve fund. In addition to authorizing all of the foregoing, the resolution does also authorize the authority officials to execute and deliver the documents that are required by Penvest in connection with the transaction. So I know that's a quick overview of the borrower's resolution, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Board questions? I had a question with regard to it says that the Allentown water plant, are there lead service lines, lead lines in the water plant, or is that, I didn't understand that part of it.
It's really just a descriptor of the system, so it's the
The
Allentown
whole system.
of the system.
Yeah.
And Erica, you may have mentioned it, but in terms of the loan, can you just quickly overview of the term, and that related information there?
Yep, so it is a 360 amortization period. There is the estimated monthly payments right now will be about $5,000 per each month.
Thank you.
And then the grant obviously does not need to be repaid.
There's also something in here about increasing rates or.
Yeah. Yes, there are 2 additional resolutions. I'm happy to go through them now, or if you want to vote after each resolution, whatever is the board's preference.
Okay, so the first one right now is for specifically loan and the grant.
The borrowing
The
resolution.
borrower's resolution, correct?
Let's talk about all 3 of them. So we have the package and then we can vote on each one individually, but we have the information all 3.
Okay. Great. So the second 2 resolutions that I'll cover, these look very similar to the resolutions that you would have seen with the last Penvest transaction. So the first is a reimbursement resolution required by Penvest. This resolution permits the authority to use Penvest proceeds to reimburse itself for costs incurred in connection with the project. The authority can reimburse itself for expenditures made up to 60 days prior to the date the reimbursement resolution is adopted, and then expenditures made after the date of the resolution. Any questions I can answer with respect to the reimbursement resolution?
Any board questions? Okay, next.
Okay, and the third and final resolution is Resolution 9-2024-3. This is another resolution which is required by Penvest. It's the rate resolution. This resolution authorizes the authority to adopt rates consistent with the concession agreement and the indenture that produce revenues sufficient for the authority to cover all of its operational and maintenance costs, the debt service on this Penvest loan, as well as any other outstanding debt of the authority. Any questions with respect to that resolution?
Board question? So have we estimated the impact on rates at all?
We have not done that piece of it yet. We have to close on the loan and get the actual debt scheduled. Because the amounts that are listed here, the $1.55 million for loan is actually going to come down because our project costs come down. Once we get the final loan amount and the final debt service schedule, then the rate will just be derived directly off of that debt service schedule.
Okay.
Do you remember what was the interest rate for the loan?
Oh, is it 1%?
1%, yeah.
Yeah, pretty good deal. And it's a 20-year loan.
Yeah.
Okay, other board questions? Anybody have questions? So, Mr. Solicitor. I'm going to pass it on to you to summarize the first one.
We'll do it piecemeal. All right, we'll start with the first one. So the first one is Resolution 9-2024-1. It is a resolution entitled Borrower Resolution. It's authorizing the board to secure on behalf of the authority a loan from Penvest in a maximum principal amount not to exceed $1,555,508, and also at the same time accept a grant from Penvest in a maximum amount not to exceed $3,383,892, and authorizing certain actions consistent whereof by the authority's officials.
Thank you. Very good. All right. We have that. Yep. Motion made by Jeff. Seconded by Amir. Those who ask for a tally of votes. Let's have a roll call.
Roll call on resolution 9-2024-1, Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Amir Famili,
Yes.
Ted Lyons,
Yes.
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Norma Cusick,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Sean Ziller.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Okay. On to number two.
Number two, which is resolution number 9-2024-2. This is a reimbursement resolution which relates to the borrower's resolution with regards to the authority cycle 1 lead service line replacement for the Allentown water plant and distribution system. This allows the authority to reimburse from Penvest proceeds any monies it expends in advance of receiving those proceeds with regards to this project.
Thank you. So moved. Motion made by Amir,
Second.
seconded by Linda. Thank you. Any questions? All right,
Roll
roll call,
on
please.
9-2024-2, Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Amir Camili,
Yes.
Ted Lyons,
yes,
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Norma Cusick,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Sean Ziller.
Yes.
Thank you. 7-8.
On to number three. Thank you.
Number three is resolution number 9-2024-3, and this is the rate resolution, also consistent with this cycle 1 project with Penvest lead service line replacements. And this is a requirement by Penvest, which would indicate that the authority would adopt sufficient rates consistent with the concession agreement in the indenture no later than 3 months before the scheduled amortization of the loan in the amount not to exceed $1,555,508.
Thank you.
So moved.
Motion made by Amir, seconded by Jeff. Roll call, please.
We'll call on 9-2024-3, Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Amir Camili,
Yes.
Ted Lyons,
yes,
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Norma Cusick,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Sean Ziller.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Erica, thank you very much for presentation, being here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Summarize. Thank you. All right, moving on the agenda. Next under Finance Administration is the 2025 preliminary budget for discussion purposes.
All right. So we have a pretty detailed presentation to go through today about budget. And Ed and I are going to kind of do our normal tag team sort of approach here and share some information with the board about where we are with budget. Last time we were together, we gave preliminary assumptions. We're going to go through those in a little bit more detail as it relates to staffing. And Ed has actual cash flows and numbers to show us this time. So a lot of this will look familiar at the outset because it is information that we began discussing. So for today, we are focusing on, again, the strategic initiatives that are included in the budget and looking at staffing changes and other assumptions. As we get into the fund financials, we'll have more detailed numbers to look at, as I mentioned, and then coming up in the next few meetings, we will get into more detail about rate impacts and seeking approval of the budget itself, and then future rate adoption by mid-November. We are required to have a budget approved by November 1st, so seeking that schedule. So as we talked about this last time, I'm not going to belabor the point on this slide, but we do have several strategic initiatives that are requiring some support in 2025 related to the regional sewer program, the 7 plan, our lead program, asset management, and as well as a couple of other areas that we'll dive into. So we have staffing requests related to those 4 areas. And then we have additional support that's needed more in the form of consultant support related to our software, business system implementation, safety program, as well as the optimization approach for the new staffing and current staffing. So as we talked about last time, we have been adding a lot of staff over time. And this is the same slide that we saw last time over the past 11 years since the Allentown Water and Sewer lease, we've added 26.5 new positions. Those positions have been primarily focused on core functions of operations and maintenance, customer service, and administrative areas. And we've been beginning to grow more recently in areas related to project management and asset management, those sorts of things. So you can see by the numbers on this list. We have some needs that have been really of the focus of a lot of our board meetings over the past few years. So it should come as no surprise that we're here to talk about support needed for the regional sewer plan. We hear about that at just about every meeting. Also, our lead program is a new regulatory driven initiative. Looking for improved systems and data-driven decision-making related to our asset management program. And just overall, the change in regulations and expense is a significant driver for the changes in our budget. So wanted to dive a little more deeply into some of these areas and ask for board specific feedback on how we should represent these in our budget. Because there are, for each of these, most of these areas, there are still quite a few unknowns. For the regional sewer program, there are some concepts that are under development. We talked about them a little bit last time as well. We're working with the 15 municipalities that we serve to develop concepts around a regional high-strength surcharge program. And that would entail having LCA staff going out and sampling and monitoring commercial and industrial dischargers to identify the sources of high-strength discharges into our sewer system. It's a pretty labor-intensive program. We're also working with the municipalities to flesh out ideas around a regional approach to addressing inflow and infiltration and how that might work to the benefit of all 15 municipalities. And then in order for us to really monitor the program and understand success of an I&I program, we need a really strong billing meter program, which will build upon the metering program that's already in place. So those are three big concepts that are new, that are being built into the Regional Act 537 plan that Phil's been working so hard on, and many others. But there are still some unknowns as it relates to the municipalities' level of agreement or support for these programs, and which municipalities might participate in the I&I program, for example. The regional surcharge program in particular is one that we either need all the municipalities to be involved in, or we need to come up with a different way to do it. And we're just not 100% there yet with the municipalities in terms of agreement. The timeline for approvals is probably into the early part of 2025. So with those unknowns, but also understanding the workload that's ahead of us, we have identified current and future staffing requirements if we're going to implement these programs. So for 2025, to fully investigate and develop that regional surcharge program, we indicated a need for 2 inspectors or technicians. Those would be folks working with Andrew and his crew to go out to the municipalities and the commercial companies to inspect and review and monitor and understand how the regional surcharge program would come together. And then an I&I program manager. This is really, regardless of the regional program, the largest system in the Clines Island sewer system is the city of Allentown, and a need for a significant amount of I&I work to be done in the city system would require some dedicated staff support there. So there are some, and then in the future at the bottom there, we think if these programs take off, we're going to probably need additional support as well in the form of some laboratory support as well as data management related to the I&I program. For the new staff that we're recommending for 2025, there are some revenue offsets. And I think this is a positive that we have the ability to generate revenue to cover these costs, but I do also recognize that revenue offset also means rates. So where, for example, the staffing costs for the surcharge program would be applied to the high-strength discharger, that means those commercial and industrial customers will pay the cost of those new staff additions. But the way the program would be structured, it would be full cost recovery in the future for those staff additions. For the I&I program, this really will depend on how the regional program is developed and how it all comes together. But essentially, the I&I program today that we're doing in Allentown is recoverable through the capital cost recovery charges that we apply to customer bills. In the future, if we're doing it on a more regional basis, it would be applied through to the municipalities as well in terms of cost sharing for the regional aspect of the program. So there are some regional offsets for, some revenue offsets for these positions. So just kind of trying to take these in chunks. What I'm asking for just directional from the board is some feedback on how to capture this in the budget if you have a preference. We've included it in the budget and the numbers that Ed is going to go through. We've included these positions, but we could take a different approach if the board felt it would be prudent to do that. For example, we could hold off on we could remove the regional surcharge program staff from the budget and ask for them to be added later once we know the municipal direction on it. I think that would be kind of a board direction that we would want to know if that's how you wanted it handled. Because we don't know where the municipalities will land on that program, we certainly won't add those positions until we know the direction of that program. So we either include them in the budget now and wait, or we don't include them in the budget and we ask for them to be added later once we know what's happening. And the same could be said for the I&I program as well. And actually earlier today, AJ and Phil and I were talking about internal and external different ways of handling the I&I program. But we do think that the I&I program manager is needed now, regardless of the shape of that program. So I wanted to pause there and just take these positions as a small chunk and see what the board's thoughts are on how to handle these 3 positions in the budget.
Just a couple of questions. And if you look at year on year, not the revenue, our net bottom line growth, how much is going to be?
In terms of expenses?
Net, if look at the revenue, so in the business they call EBITDA, right? So you look at your bottom line, year on year, how much our profitability will grow, not the revenue. You take all the cost away. So you made, I don't know, $1 million this year. So you go next year, how much growth you will have on your bottom line?
Wow, that's a tough one to answer because that depends on the rates that you use to get at it. So let me see if I can. If we go back to what we showed you 2 weeks ago, we would have showed you that revenue needed to grow by 9% in suburban water, so that you could cover yourself at net zero. Okay, are you with me so far?
Yeah, there.
So we said you would have needed 9% increase in revenue to just be zero. In suburban wastewater, we said you would need almost 10 to get to zero. And in the city, well, the city's set by the rate table. So ultimately, I can, without hesitation, answer the net is going up at least in double digits, it looks like, because of how that table is set up and the operating expenses against it. So
basically, without rate increase, we would be going.
If we didn't do a rate increase, we would be suffering negative numbers. I would be talking lots about negative numbers.
The reason I'm asking, this is just a philosophy, my thinking. I'm not saying right or wrong. If your overhead growth, right, your SG&A growth, outpace your net growth on your bottom line, your business is going to go bankrupt.
Yes, you're suggesting You're suggesting, and I'm gonna translate it a bit so that people can understand. You're saying, and like in the world of private business, you can't just go out and raise prices because your costs went up. So you're stuck with a pricing model that says it's X. And now your Y is the expenses you're gonna throw against it. And you are correct, if you're gonna hold prices static and your costs go up, even minimal amounts, 5-6%, you're gonna suffer a loss on the bottom line, and ultimately cash flows will do the same thing. Yes.
I mean, my philosophy is that your SG&A cannot outpace your bottom line growth, right? And we are achieving what we're trying to achieve by increasing rate every year, right? 9% and whatever it is, and then our SG&A growth is now at 11%. That's not sustainable. Right? I mean, we cannot, in my opinion, we cannot be adding SG&A just by raising the rate. Right? There has to be a component of the efficiency in the organizations, right? For example, I'm just using I mean, Kevin is not here. 4 years ago, a project came forward of changing the meter. And Kevin asked, okay, where is the offset if because automation of the reading, so what's going to happen to those people? Our project went away, came back again this year. I'm just using an example, right or wrong. So there are, if the automation reading be upgrading the meters, what's happening to those resources? Where is the efficiency from those? So just, you know, we don't have shareholders, but we are here as a representative of ratepayer to make sure that the costs keep not going up every year. So every year we're having a doubled, 10% or 8% SG&A growth. This is not a sustainable organizations. So I'm not talking about one resources here, one resources there. That is we got to look at back. We got to look at the strategy of your organization. You have to look at how your organization has to be set up that we will not every year to come back and ask for 8 or 9 people. But I'm not going to say one is right, one is wrong. I mean, for Act 537, they needed engineers. That was a mandate we need to have because of all this project coming. We got to approve that. But I'm struggling, right? In the 5 years we're sitting here, we're adding people. I think I have 14 opening right now. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, if it was me, I would say, go fill up those 14 people and then come back to see where are your stable organization, what it needs, and we add for more people. I'm not saying it is right or wrong. I'm just talking about my philosophy or approach for the organizational structures.
Want to discuss that or just want to, other board questions?
I mean, I can't disagree with your philosophy.
Okay, that's fine.
So I can only say that in my mind, these things present themselves yearly. Okay. For instance, the surcharge program. And all of that has come up as a result of all of the 537 stuff that's now bearing or coming to light that we were deficient on. When we talk about the regional sewer program, what are we going to do with PTP? All of that stuff is kind of new. So I'm sitting here going, that's going to. I get we want to leverage something. But it's difficult when some of these things appear out of nowhere and they require resources. So this surcharge, the NI stuff, quite frankly, I can go on because I'm agreeing with you. I came from the private world, and I'm agreeing with you that at some point there should be some leverage. Until you start to talk about this, and then you add into it now that we have to do all these things on the lead service line side. I mean, they just start consuming resources that we think we don't have right now. And so agree with you philosophically. Philosophically, I would love to see a point in time where we say, head count stays the same, there's nothing else, from a regulatory standpoint, coming at us, and we don't need to raise rates except for inflation.
So the sewage billing program is pretty complicated today. We simplify that, correct, if they agree. So we have a lot of resources right now monitoring those sewage billing program. We talk about it a lot, it's very complicated. So if this is agreed upon, what's gonna happen with those resources? I mean, I might be, I mean, if you disagree, I'm all ears to hear.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think the lead service line program is gonna go on for years.
I'm not talking about individual, I'm just talking about the
Yes.
specific, right? I'm not gonna argue that getting an I or is wrong or right? I'm just saying that we have to look at broadly, where are the efficiency, right? With the money that we are spending to upgrade our equipment, going to a better sewage billing program, so on and so forth. We gotta get those efficiency and add those resources. Because if constantly every year we have to add 8 or 10 people, that is not a sustainable business practice.
That I would not disagree with.
I have a comment, Ed.
Go ahead.
You know, essentially demand is increasing for our output. This is, if you will, a sales demand. We are required to do certain things we're not required to do in the past. Either we do them or we don't do them. And if in fact we are essentially operating at full throttle personnel wise, the answer is simply don't do these extra programs. Maintain the status quo. Now, if you're going to add demand and more, if you will, sales, you need people to do it. So to me, it's not a question of necessarily creating more efficiency. Sometimes you just need more resource to get the job done. I think that the staff has to decide whether they can actually do these extra programs with the current staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, and just to kind of support, I think what you're saying, Ted and Ed as well, these are new programs, it's adding workload. So there's not necessarily an efficiency that we can gain somewhere else to free up resource to do this new stuff. It's all new stuff. And when we look at some of the graphs that Ed has in the presentation, we see the trajectory of capital, the capital programs that are coming as well. It's really, you can see the strain on the organization from a financial standpoint, but that also translates into how we get it done. We're not going to deliver on these projects. We're not going to deliver on these regulatory requirements. We're not going to deliver on the regional aspect of the program that we're trying to build. Then fine, we don't need to add the resource. But this is what's being asked of us by the region and by our regulators, and can't get it done with the people that we have today.
What happens if you don't do them?
Well, so there's different, I guess it's a question of different ways of doing them, so could we outsource more? Potentially, yes, we could outsource more. It's really, especially for these programs, if the 15 municipalities are saying, we want a high strength surcharge program, or we want this regional I&I program, DEP is telling us I&I removal is the key to a successful 537 plan. These are new things that we're being tasked to do. If we don't do them with internal resources, but we're still required to do them, we will need external resources. That's really it. So.
Can we really do the I&I internally? Because that's been something that we've been after for ever since I came on the board. So
yeah,
can it really be done?
What we're planning for or expecting for the I&I program manager is to have dedicated resource to work with all the 15 municipalities and the city of Allentown on their programs and the contractors that are out there doing various projects throughout the region, doing the data monitoring for leakage and rehab effectiveness after the projects are done. It's a very large amount of work that we're expecting to need somebody internally to at least manage it.
And the only other thing I can add to that discussion is I get a little bit concerned when we start to say, if we don't do it internally, we're gonna outsource it, and then we're gonna pay for somebody else to have a profit. And that bothers me.
How about the notion of there's diminishing returns in the I&I program? Some places they've done an awful lot and other places they haven't done so much. And so you should be actually looking at the projection of how many people do you need now until you get to the point where you're in a maintenance mode of I&I. And I think you're talking about the full program manager, but there's that blip in there where, and that's maybe the opportunity to hire somebody as a contractor to do that blip part of it and then possibly do the balance of it. Has there any been any assessment of that? Because I think we're now getting into Allentown, the city I&I, and that's a huge demand on resources. Will that diminish after 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, and get into a maintenance mode across the whole system, or are we going to have that peak of requirements for personnel for continued process?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really see past maybe the 10-year time frame in terms of where we'll be. Certainly what we're planning is a 5 to 10-year program that will be reasonably intense in terms of the flow monitoring, constant flow monitoring, constant project design, project implementation, rehab effectiveness monitoring. All of that is going to be on a cycle likely for the next 10 years to really try to get as much of the leakage out of the city system as we can. Yes, it should go into a maintenance mode going forward, but you're always going to have those elements of flow monitoring and project management even for the maintenance period. So when we look ahead, and maybe it's a misstep to put the future staffing, because these are just ideas at this point, but this I&I data management flow data management person, that really could be more of the trade-off that you're talking about, Amir, with the person maybe doing less intense billing work that she's currently doing. She could shift, and we could look for efficiencies and have her do more data management on the flow monitoring and billing or metering side. I think there's some internal things that we could look at there. But this is going to be a 10-year sustained effort at a minimum.
I heard from Amir, he's also looking at trade. There's things we have to do that we didn't have to do before.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's things that we have been moving towards efficiency on that we've been doing for some time, and the finances, the payroll, all that that has taken an awful lot of manpower to do is being improved by the computer system and more SCADA and whatever that doesn't require the personnel to be out in the field. So it's not just adding people because we have new programs. It's also, if we're doing things more efficiently, then we should be able to be freeing up some other people to be doing other things. Again, from our point of view, and I'm looking at it, and I think Mira said this as well, is that we're here to answer the questions, at least ask the questions that customers are going to be asking. The city, the municipalities, the county, how are we justifying such a continuous increase? And it's up to us to have a very sound story to tell that is compelling, that explains why we're doing what we're doing, why it's costing so much, because it doesn't look pretty.
Yeah.
Well, just to add to that, I mean, I would think the unfortunate part is that we have a lot of regulatory obligations hitting all at the same time. First there was the consent order with EPA and all of that, that translated into the 537 plan and all the I&I work and capital improvements and capacity improvements. Then you throw in the lead service line work, then you throw in PFAS treatment. So those are just three that I can think of that I kind of think this is, you know, it's like a sine curve, right? I think we have a peak of issues now. And yes, hopefully at some point, unless the regulators keep pounding us with new requirements, it's not going to go down. It's going to continue to go up and the rates are going to continue to go up. And that's out of our control. That's a regulatory issue. We don't have a choice. We have equipment and facilities that are very old that have to be upgraded to stay in compliance. So that unfortunately the money has to be spent. I would think, and I don't know the numbers, but I would think the capital portion of all of the budget and the work we're doing is probably significantly greater than some new staff that we may or may need to implement those projects. I would think that that part of it is probably, I don't know, I don't want to throw out any numbers, but I would think that's that's what's really driving the budget, not the personnel.
No, I would agree with you 100%, Jeff, though. And when, like I said, when we get into some of the graphs, you'll see where the capital is going versus the operating expenses, which are, they're not flat, but they're much flatter compared to capital. You know, I've been with LCA a pretty long time, and I have seen the cycle of how things have happened here. One of the things that just strikes me about, especially just going back to this slide where we look at the positions that are added over the past 11 years, there have been a lot of positions, and I absolutely hear what you're saying and the concern. But I also want to acknowledge there were different drivers in the past for a lot of these positions. Specifically 11 years ago, we had a system come on board that had significant maintenance needs that was not necessarily captured in the staffing that came over. It was to a certain degree, but not to the full level. And then we have our lease requirements that are that we agreed to, and there's fines and penalties if we don't achieve certain maintenance requirements of the city system. And we needed to staff up to be able to meet those. We also had an approach, right, wrong, or indifferent. We had an approach in our suburban systems of minimizing maintenance and minimizing preventive maintenance. And we had to staff up in our suburban division as well to address maintenance requirements as the system has begun to age. So, and there's a number of positions in here that relate to administrative support, HR, customer service, which were really just organizational, structural things that we didn't have or need prior to taking Allentown on that we need now because we're a larger organization. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is there's different drivers for different chunks of the employees that we've added over time. The employees that we added in the past 10 years, I view as being really about level setting for the new size of the organization, the new things that we have to deliver on to our customers. And what we're doing now is about building capacity to address the growing project workload, the growing regulatory requirements. And to LCA's credit, the demands that the region is asking of us, because we have established ourselves as a regional leader in this wastewater arena. And so the municipalities are looking to us to drive these programs forward, like the surcharge program and the I&I programs. So we're in a different mode now than we were in the past, but totally get it. We're adding and adding and adding, and we need to be very cognizant about the impact of that.
You may address the 14 people that were currently have been approved and have not been hired, and where can we get an idea from our HR people that as to the challenges and how we might overcome that? Because adding those 14 would reduce the burden on existing personnel to get things done.
Yeah.
And how would they fit also towards these new positions that you're asking for?
Sure. Yeah, we can report on that at the next meeting. I will say that it's been kind of a constant struggle to keep basic operational positions filled. There's a lot of turnover. And I don't want to point to Andrew and Chris, but they've kind of seen a little bit of a revolving door in terms of some of their operational folks. So where we're seeing, I think, the impact of those openings is on overtime costs and of course the burden to the employees who are filling in for them. We're getting the work done, but by paying a premium for employees to do the extra, go the extra mile to fill those roles. We are having some challenges in filling technical, higher level technical positions. The engineering, project management type positions has been really, really difficult to source. So they take a long time to fill and find candidates for those. But we can give you a more comprehensive look at what those 14 positions are.
As far as the I&I program manager, I think right now essentially is it Arcadis or Ecom? They're essentially doing the bulk of that work. Jim Shelton. I don't remember who he works for. And would there be some offset of their costs if you hire a program manager? Or is it in addition to, or would there be some savings there to Amir's point, balancing the budget?
Yeah, I think there could be. I think we could scope the position and search for someone who has a skill set that is more aligned with what we need. And Phil is doing an amazing job with this regional sewer program, but I&I is not necessarily his area of expertise. He's trying to run programs and trying to drive the ball forward. But having someone who has a real skill set and expertise in that area, as well as flow monitoring and meter management, that kind of thing, would really help and could offset some of the external costs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not that we're looking to replace them entirely, because I
Right.
think they've done an excellent job, the things they presented, but maybe there's some day-to-day or local things that could be done. I don't know.
I mean, how great would it be if we had someone internally who could run the hydraulic pump? I don't know if we'll find that person, but I think that's a possibility.
Board comments on what we've talked about so far?
Brian, I have a question. What responsibility do local townships and boroughs have regarding their I&I program? Because I know Salisbury Township, they do the work themselves within the township. Is there any way some of the boroughs and townships, could, lessen our burden with this program?
Yeah, Norma, that's a great question. The concept, we haven't done a full presentation to the board about the regional I&I program and what that could look like. But essentially what we're trying to achieve with that program is more of a sharing of resources so that each municipality that's part of the program isn't needing to do their own projects individually, that it's more centrally managed. We have a way to prioritize the projects regionally rather than municipality by municipality, essentially get the biggest bang for our buck. And then by doing that, we would expect overall program costs would go down, and the municipalities who may or may not have technical expertise to be doing this work themselves would be contributing more financially and having LCA run the program with the technical review committee made up of some of the municipal leaders. So the way that it's working now is more of a patchwork quilt approach, and the results are not necessarily, we're not necessarily achieving the results handling it that way. Bringing it together under one umbrella, we think it could be more efficient and eventually cost everyone less by doing it that way.
And how do they feel about that?
There are different perspectives. We're designing, or we're talking about it as it being an optional program. So there are some municipalities who have been pretty quick to say they like the idea. They think it makes sense because maybe their system doesn't leak as much, but they're willing to contribute so that regionally we get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of I&I removal. And and some municipalities are really looking forward to lowering their costs, so.
Thank you.
Another board question? You did ask for comments on.
Oh, yes, no, absolutely. I do just need to be somewhat focused because this is a budget presentation. The staff proposal is to include the positions. The numbers that Ed is going to review has these positions included. And because we only have so many more chances to present this to you, if there's a reason that we should remove any of these positions and take a different approach on how we're handling these positions, we want to hear that. I'll move on. Huh?
Well, from
Yeah.
my point of view, just after all this discussion, I do think we need to focus our hiring on those 14 positions and do something that's got to get those positions going to relieve stress on the existing personnel. And I like the idea of some things we know have to be done, adding people for that in the budget. And things that, as you mentioned, one of the options was that if we don't know yet, don't add them, come back later on and make a proposal. And then we can answer something, the question directly that, okay, you need these for this purpose because this is the defined program. It's a lot easier to do that than to say, we don't know what we're doing, we're going to put people on the site. So that's my point of view at this point.
What we could do for this particular one, then we have a few more yet to talk about. For this particular one, it would be to remove the 2 positions related to the question surcharge program because there's still a lot of unknowns around that one, but leave the I&I program manager in because that's a program that is we need.
Give that person an opportunity also to develop the program prior to having to manage people to do it.
And Lisa, I think even having a, whether it's the I&I program manager position or any of the other positions being proposed, you haven't heard a lot of comments from me because I'm just trying to wrap my head around the positions themselves, and then obviously the conversation that's been occurring. But even having a matrix of understanding, what is being proposed relative to a particular position, and then again, what if we took an alternative path, if that is outsourcing it from both a logistical standpoint and a fiscal standpoint. I don't want to make too much work for you or for the staff, but just having a full sense of what the different alternatives are and how they, how that would impact the level of service, why the staff believes that a program manager in this realm is vital versus those alternatives would be helpful if you kind of get where I'm.
Mm-hmm.
I have a comment. We should all keep in mind that outsourcing doesn't reduce the cost necessarily. So to the customer, whether we outsource or insource, the financial impact might well be the same or even more. Just a comment.
I agree, Ted. So some of the reasons we, in this budget in particular, have focused more on insourcing is also about capacity building. Because we do have some succession planning needs in the organization and trying to bring in some folks who are kind of newer and fresher and able to grow with the organization. And if we have some retirements that are coming up, we might have some opportunity to grow the bench now. But
and I think and I think just with that in mind, and I know it's kind of some of this is conjecture, but also being able to understand that for some of these positions that, maybe an I&I program manager right now, will have certain responsibilities that in 10 years, presumably the position's still there, it'll look different, but also, is that the kind of person that you could presumably move into, they've done well with the I&I program manager, it would make sense for them to graduate, so to speak, into another position within the organization. So really just understanding the longevity of these positions, the sustainability, and just where they fall into the hierarchy of the LCA would be helpful. Just that context.
Thank you.
Okay, and we move on then.
Okay, the next area relates to our lead program again. These are some new requirements, as well as there are some unknowns around the positions we're talking about. Specifically for 2025, we had identified the need to complete our inventory of private side service line material. Right now, we have about 20,000, 19,000 service lines that we don't know what they're made of. And that is going to greatly impact the scope of our project to replace them within the next 10 years or so, based on the new regulatory requirements. So we thought internally about trying to fast track an inventory process to get at least the private side material identified, and we can do that through door-to-door canvassing and internal inspections of the private side plumbing. We've been pretty successful in doing that in our phase 1 project in a small area with a group of internal employees. They've been really great, but to do citywide, as primarily City of Allentown, is an enormous effort, and looking for ways to do that. The unknowns really are, how much can we do? How quickly can we get it done if we had internal, and are there other external ways to do that, because it is more of a short-term project. So it could be contract employees, or it could be a partnership with other organizations that could do this sort of thing. So I fully admit, and I think Chris has some feelings about this as well, about the unknowns around this, because it's his team that will do this work. You want to add anything on the unknown piece of it?
No, hopefully, something like this we can get done in 2, maybe 3 years to knock on every door in Allentown. But there were, some considerable discussion about adding union positions that might be air quote temporary. So I know Lisa and I have had a couple of discussions about ways to manage that, maybe with some support from outside community resources, along with, building some bridges internally in the city itself. So, again, to, hear what everybody's saying, the last thing I would want to do is add positions that are ultimately temporary, so keeping that in mind, I think we're kind of cautiously moving forward with a canvassing program.
The idea with canvassing is two positions would be solely focused on community canvassing for a somewhat short period of time. I think the flip side to that is, because we have this turnover issue, I would not see an issue with, when that project is over, being able to absorb them into vacant positions, because we do have a fair amount of turnover, especially in Chris's department, for that level of position. So if we were to move forward with doing the internal staffing for community canvassing, we would think a team of 2 could go through the city in a few years. And that's what we're recommending. The call center support is more for during the peaks of the projects, when we're out doing lead service line replacements and we're trying to get customers to sign on to the program and do the customer agreements that we looked at a few months ago. There's an uptick in phone call volume, and we think we could temp that through a temp agency for a half-time person for those peak periods. But the community canvassers is more the unknown piece. On the revenue offset side, certainly it's a required program, and we it's required by law that we do these lead service line replacements. We have to know the material, so we can't avoid doing some form of inventory process. We would be able to cover a portion of the community canvassers as staff costs through grants if we're successful in continuing to receive grants. And it is also a change of law, and there's provision within the lease agreement for lease recovery. But again, that relates to rates. So being cognizant of that. So we have these two positions in the budget, and because it's budget season, we're putting them in the budget. And I fully recognize there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, we have a lot of things to think through on this. So that's why we're kind of doing that pause and asking for feedback. Should we keep them in the budget with those unknowns, or should we take them out of the budget and bring them back like we just talked about doing for the regional surcharge program?
I have a question with regard to the canvassing. Is your success rate of knocking on doors and gaining access and being able to assess, what's that percentage?
35%.
35. And have other municipal authorities been ahead of us in this process that we could learn anything from them on how they were more successful than 35%? Because I don't know how you get access to those houses if people refuse to let you in.
Well, so there's the rub. They have to let us in. I just did a presentation at PMA last week on exactly this topic. And we have a better success rate than any of the other people that we spoke to. Presented with Schuylkill County, and their success rate is about 19, 20, 21%. I think what helps us a lot is internally we do, rather than just cold calls, we will do phone calls for a week, phone calls for another week to warn people that we're going to be in the neighborhood. And we have bilingual staff. So as people are going door to door, we have the ability to possibly, make people more comfortable by speaking in a native tongue. So I do believe that the internal staff and the work that we're putting out regarding to our customer care department is what's making us so successful.
And if not, then you have to dig it up and find it and check it out, inspect it, vacuum dig or something.
So ultimately, yeah, Jeff. So if to Lisa's point, we have to find out one way or another. Either we get two smiling faces knocking at your door, allow us to get into your basement for 10 minutes. There's no damage, there's nothing that needs to be done, or we are going to show up with a hydrovac truck, lock the street down and excavate your front yard and take a photo of it. We don't say that, of course, you know what I mean? I mean, I think internally here, all of us would rather have somebody walk into your basement and use a little scratch test in our lead kit, take a photo of it and go about our business. But ultimately, to satisfy, the compliance needs of Andrew and his team and LCA, we need to know. So we're going to have to know one way or another.
Do we do anything in writing, or is it all by phone, the notification?
Oh, so what we'll do, Linda, is we will knock on your door, right? You've already had 2 phone calls to let you know that we're coming. If you're not home, we will knock on your door, and if nobody answers, we leave a door hanger with some information about the lead program. And on the backside, there's a QR code that people can take and scan. And we built out a special application in here that you can schedule an appointment time for us to come out to your home. We have 3 days a week, 8 hours a day that allow you to pick half-hour windows. So we can schedule to come out to your home and give you the results on the spot, whether or not your home has lead inside. If you do have lead, then that triggers a whole other process internally. But, I feel LCA has gone well above and beyond to make sure that the customer is thought of in the best light here.
It would seem to me that hanging the door tag would be more effective than the phone call.
Arguably, you're not probably wrong. I think what we've had a lot of success with is our 2 guys, Anthony Morales, who was recently kind of took the position as we call him construction maintenance supervisor, but it's ultimately it's going to be the lead boots on the ground lead guy. We've had half as many people ask us to inspect their house when they see us show up and are walking up and down the street. So we were scheduled initially for 435 door-to-door knocks, and we've done 700 in that neighborhood. And it's all because hey, would you mind giving me one of those, hey, would you mind checking our house out? So having the right people in the right face in the right spot with the right gear on, I think is everything. And, you know, on top of it, we always talk about putting LCA out there in a good light, and having the right crew and the smiling crew and having multilingual people helping. I think it's working wonders for us, at least in the center of town, downtown.
Realistically, it's at 25,000 houses to check on. How long is it gonna take to really get the definitive information on that?
So, I mean, that's where, you know, we do believe we can do it in about 3 years. I think with the information we collect, if we don't get into every house, if we're able to do 35%, we're in every third house. That will feed AJ's artificial intelligence program so much better than we're able to right now. So while we may not be able to touch, the AI part of it is a satisfactory component of getting us in the right spot. So while we may not be able to touch every single one, it feeds another portion of our program to help us get to the spot where we're only changing lead lines in places where we know there are lead lines.
Okay, any other board questions?
I just wanted to comment that part of the impetus for considering doing the work in-house is, first of all, the success of the pilot program that Chris just talked about, which I think has been a boost internally in terms of our confidence to be able to do this work. But also at a meeting maybe 2 months ago, we asked board to approve a project amendment for CDM to do for us for cycle 2. And we saw the costs associated with that and thought, geez, these are people coming in from out of town to do the work versus our own people who like live here and work here and know the community. Could we be more effective if we did it ourselves? And if not ourselves, with community partners that are part of the community versus consulting. So that was the driver for thinking about doing it internally.
When you're doing the face-to-face with your customers, it's better to have your own people. It's a different motivation factor.
Any other feedback on these?
Well,
Okay, next one, sorry, there's no revenue offset for asset management. AJ's program is really taking flight and want to celebrate that. We mentioned this at the last meeting, getting 2 major systems done in terms of asset management plans this year, and really trying to build the internal capacity to do all of the other systems that we have, which is double digits worth of systems and thousands of assets that would need to be reviewed and you know, brought into this comprehensive asset management program. So we have an asset management engineer on staff, and he's more of a senior level engineer, and there's a fair amount of work that is at a technical, more entry level engineer type work to record nameplate data and do condition assessments and that sort of thing. So we thought an asset management technician in-house would be a good way to build our internal efficiency at doing this work, as well as build some internal capacity for that succession planning and growth of the department as well. And we do see, we've talked about asset management quite a bit over time, that long-term we'll see some efficiencies, we'll see some lower life cycle costs. The program will begin to pay for itself over time, but we're still in its infancy and need to grow the program to get there. So
3 people that we approved for AJ's group, how many people we hired so far? 1?
You mean within it for asset management? So we hired 1. We have an asset management engineer, and this would be the second.
There was 2 other positions. I think we approved 3 positions for your group, no?
There's other positions, there's a planning engineer, but
Yes.
not asset management,
Okay. But those 2 positions for planning, no, we haven't hired that.
not yet.
and this is one of those positions that doesn't go away.
Right.
You need this forever if you're doing it.
This is like a, when you look at asset management technicians, like a BS degree or high school with like 2 years
I mean, yeah, I was thinking entry level engineer, you know.
instead of engineer.
We actually talked about some of the interns that we had here this summer, whether they would be a good fit. Now they've kind of all gone back to school and done their other thing, but kind of that recently graduated, ready to get out there and start doing some things. Okay. And then we have a couple of other ones. We did talk about these last time as well. I'll touch on them. First is related to a potential new requirement for PA one call, which is the call before you dig law. And there is a proposed legislation to change the PA one call requirements, requiring LCA to mark service lines from the street to the house for both water and sewer, which is a significant change, significant increase in what we're currently doing. Andrew and Chris have been monitoring this legal change or this legislative change over the past several weeks. I don't know if you have any particular updates. Do we think this is going to happen, or you're really not sure at this point?
Sounds like it's sort of a coin flip at the moment.
Okay.
But it sounds like we should know more information relatively soon.
Okay.
This is one of those that, I mean, it doesn't, they're basically using a piece of equipment and they scan it and then they mark it. So it's not like it's a position that is going to grow into other opportunities within the organization.
So it's changed over time. It's a remarkably technical position now. And the new requirements are going to require us to actually use a sonde, a magnetic tool to go up through the sewer lateral towards the customer's house and mark that as well. So something currently we don't have. The issue with that is when you open up a manhole here, we always require 2 people. It's a safety issue. We just can't have a single person trying to move manhole lid and then operate a piece of equipment that's working. So Andrew and I are both fingers crossed watching the legislation. There's 2 separate bills going through, one in the Senate, one in the House. And both of them are fighting to keep in the Good Samaritan clause, which means that we will do our best to mark as we do currently with T's on the sewer and rough estimations where the customer line goes. But if those get removed and it requires us to mark from main to house and sewer main to house as well, a remarkable amount of work. And frankly, we're only focused on the city of Allentown now because of all the lead line changes that we're going to have. We just know we're going to get swamped with that. Generally speaking, even if it doesn't change, it's going to affect the suburban division as well. So we have our fingers crossed that the Good Samaritan portion of the law stays.
This is the kind of position, though, that someone could sit in for a year or 2 years and then move on and gain some more skills in other parts of the organization. We've seen that happen historically. It's a good training ground for an employee to learn the system and learn the technology.
I guess what I was trying to get, other than my lack of technology in this case, if you waited until there's actually a law that says exactly what you have to do, there's usually time frame after that law has been enacted in order to get yourself ramped up. And so is it something you have to develop for a year before they can actually do the work, or can you go hire that person to do that work once the law is actually known what they have to do?
So arguably what would happen is we would use internal staff. So we do kind of have 2 or 3 people on suburban side and the city side that are specially trained. We have every 6 months they go through a kind of retraining session. So we do have people on both sides that could step up and fill that role. But the problem then again, to Lisa's point before, is now we have to backfill. And Andrew and I are both struggling a little bit to fill those entry level positions for us.
Chris, just to follow up on what Brian was saying, so suppose they would pass the law in November 1st, or, would it become effective November 1st of 2025, or would it become effective, 2 months later? Is there any lead time?
Jan 1, 2025.
Okay,
So I'm sorry, Lisa, please.
I was going to say part of the driver on this one is also that the PA1 call law currently expires. And so it's a reenactment of the law with the other goodies and changes that the legislators might be looking for. So 1/1/25, there will be a new law. It's whether it includes this or doesn't include this
When does it expire?
this year. This year,
12/31.
12/31?
yeah. It's not going away. It's
No, I'm thinking the bills though, that
Oh,
the
there's,
bills could just die because a new legislature will be coming in before the end of the year, before the election, and then they have to start all over again to put new bills out. So it could take another year for new laws to be enacted, I think. Isn't that correct?
Honestly, I don't.
Technically, I'm pretty sure anything that's in, quote, the hopper dies when the legislative session dies and has to be redone again with the new, whoever gets reelected. So I'm not sure that there would be, they might just re-up one call as it is and then start all over again.
They could
With
do
the
that.
first.
It seems to me there's some momentum that they're trying to get something done quickly so that it's fully reenacted with the things that they want to see. There was a committee hearing last week, I think it was.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
You know, there's a lot of momentum going right now, so I believe they're still in session, so I would expect something.
now I don't know when the session ends.
They made mention that there's 9 more voting days before the session ends for the year.
I would just add, as someone who's been involved with a one call non-compliance, with one of my clients, I am all for putting the person in the budget. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, I mean, this one to me seems pretty clear. If the law goes a different way, we wouldn't fill it. But if the law does go the way that Chris and Andrew are concerned, we're gonna need to fill it. So we need to have the resource available for it at the right time.
Lisa, just relative to this position, given the, I mean, and you guys would certainly know better, but just given the nature of the work that LCA does and the large geographic area that it covers, would one, and I guess two, I believe it was Ed's point, would two, would that be even enough if this law passed and therefore we had to follow through with it, or is one or a team of 1 or 2 enough?
Well, we currently have 2 dedicated to PA one call.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so this is one additional to try to address the increased workload and I mean, I think there would easily be enough to say we need 1 in suburban and 1 in city, but we are trying to achieve some level of efficiency and understanding that some of the pressure on PA one call goes with the seasons and the projects that are going, whether there's a project or a project in the area. Can get really intense or slow down at different times as well. So.
Got it.
Okay.
But
Okay. So just want to be cognizant of time. This is helpful discussion and feedback. This one is the last one, I believe. Yes. And I hope that this is a simpler one. We have been asked by 2 townships that we serve to consider taking over operation of sewer pump stations in their townships. And there's 5 in one township and 1 or 2 in the other. 2?
6 and 1 and potentially 2.
Yeah. So ask Andrew, he knows. So 8 pump stations that potentially these townships are looking for LCA to operate. Part of it has to do with the loss of operators due to retirement at the townships. They each have 1, or one township has 1. I think the other one doesn't even have 1 right now, a certified operator. So we're working on discussing with them a service contract for them, and the service contract would fully cover the cost to staff the operation. So we have proposed a operations and maintenance technician for Andrew's group, essentially to support this municipal service contract approach. And we would not fill it unless we have the contract to pay for it, and it would be fully offset by the contract. So we covered a lot of ground with the positions, and I know the positions are a hot button issue within this budget. We talked a little bit about some revenue offsets, which recognize, of course, that also means rates. But in some cases, these are costs that we will be putting into rates, whether they're for our staff or they're for consultants for some of these positions like the I&I program or the lead program. We do think that the new revenue that would come from the regional high strength surcharge program would be a new source of revenue that in the future, after the program's developed, would cover 100% of those staff positions. And same thing for the municipal service contracts. So we do have some revenue offsets to support the positions that are being requested. One change that we made since the last presentation a couple weeks ago is we have the 14 open vacant positions, and we had tucked into our budget a solicitor position because at this time last year we were still talking with King Spry about the future of our contract, and we eventually determined to continue with King Spry. Kevin has been great. And so we had carried forward the solicitor position. We want to pull that out. So we do have a little bit of savings by removing that one position. And that brings the 2025 budgeted number of employees to 192. We will, of course, adjust this based on feedback from today's meeting. How that works out in terms of the costs. We looked at this last time by backing out the solicitor position. The increase is slightly less than what it was in the last presentation. And then you'll see I broke it down. The 7.3% increase is really made up of two factors. One being the cost of filling the positions that are currently vacant. And we have that at about $833,000. And then the cost of the 8.5 new positions, $660,000. If we back out the expected revenue for those generated by those new positions, then we have a net impact of the new positions of $252,000. So a little more granular detail than we presented.
A little better way of presenting it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Sure thing. You ready for the real numbers? Sorry, not quite there yet. We have these are
Little numbers.
These are big numbers as well. These are the consultant services that we built into the budget to support other strategic initiatives. These are kind of every year we have some amount of these, a little bit more this year because of some of the requirements there to finish out the implementation on the Tyler project, also some safety components, some rate analysis and emergency response planning requirements.
Lisa, one question. Can you go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
So the cost of filling the current vacancies, was that already in the 2024 budget? So that's not new. It's been just a carryover, the 833,210?
Yes, that's a carryover. So essentially the forecast is where we think we'll be by the end of the year, but includes some of the vacancies. So what's shown for budget for 2025 is all of the positions filled for the full year.
So think of it as you got 14 positions that were not in for an entire year in 2024. They're gonna be in the entire year for 2025. So there's a difference.
They were budgeted for the entire year of 24 though,
Yeah,
right?
but we're comparing to a forecast.
Yes, understood.
Which would be lower as a result of having them unfilled for a period of time. Okay.
Ed.
My stuff now. Okay. I think we went over some of this before. We used the 2.5% inflationary impact rate that seems to be what the prevailing wisdom is. in the marketplace. Lease rates for the city are by agreement, so we're following that. Suburban wastewater rates that would be mostly by agreement, more specifically the signatory agreements that are in place. And then on suburban water, we had 9.86, but I don't believe that that's the number right now. We actually lowered that as we get into the numbers. That was where we were the last time we talked, but we've taken that down a little bit. We'll get into that. Okay, on the internal service, we're going from 3.3 to 4.6. You can see the biggest jump is exactly what we talked about with respect to the strategic initiatives of over 800,000. I'll put the 800,000 breakdown into the column on the left there. Safety related 100, munis related 125. Asset management 100,000. The building optimization that we want to take a look at of 150,000. Rate affordability 125, and looking at a digital master plan 200,000. That was all taken from the slides previously that she went through. So that's the bulk of the increase in the internal service fund that gets allocated to the other three funds. So on suburban water, operating expenses up 3.53 to 2024 forecast. There is an inflation impact in there. Again, that was 2.5%. The cost impact from the strategic initiatives is worth $302,000 in suburban water. There's the proportional share of personnel costs for the budget. Capital budget is 4.8 million, and we're going to do that through current rates and reserves. No borrowing required, no new debt service required for suburban water. Revenue, I was right. So we said overall a 7.53% to attain budget. However, we are going to use $400,000 of cash reserves to kind of minimize the impact of rates. So with 1.0% volume growth, the net impact on rates would be around 6.53%. Metrics, well, we're using $400,000 worth of reserves. We had originally started out with 0, and then upon looking at the metrics in terms of days cash on hand, it made sense to use some reserves and not have any detriment to days cash on hand. So we're still better. All metrics in this fund are pretty good. So looking at the condensed cash flows, I'll go immediately to the bottom line on cash flow. There's $400,000 of negative cash flow, which suggests we're taking money out of the coffers. The operating ratio is 1.26. The debt service coverage ratio is going to be 2.26. All good. Capital coverage is going to be a little bit less than 100 because we're using some reserves, but essentially without borrowing, you're covering it 100% of the capital from reserves and current rates. So unrestricted days cash on hand, again, we shoot for 180. That's at 293.60, even using the reserve. So that was kind of what led us to do that. And we still have $3 million worth of unrestricted investment balances. You can see just looking at the operating revenues, again, 20 million is a 7.3% increase. The operating expenses of 12.4. Actually, when you strip away the strategic initiatives on the operating side and factor in inflation, essentially between Andrew and Chris, they ended up actually spending a little bit less on a real basis. So I was pretty happy with that. So we'll end up with about $7.9 million after that available for debt service, $3.5 million of debt service. And that's how we get to the 4.4 million in capital. Questions? Again, this was a look at operating expenses, and I like to break this down into the different impacts. You can see that we're up to forecast by a little bit more than $500,000, 394,000 compared to budget. Inflation covers most of that. And then, so the volume would be negative 181,000, negative 30 compared to forecast and budget respectively. But once you factor in the strategic imperatives, you can see that, like I said, what made me say that on a real basis, we spent a little bit less by 121 versus 271 on an apples to apples basis compared to the last year's budget. Revenue requirements. I don't think that this is right. I'm sitting here looking at, we came up with 6.3. So I'm gonna have to take a powder on this one. Because the revenue requirement should be in the neighborhood of 7.3 minus the 1 should give us around 6.3 in terms of rate impact, like we talked about. So this is an old.
So we have it in the note, but these numbers need to be reviewed.
Yeah, it's on my last leg when I was doing some of these schedules. This is the capital. At this point in time, we have not deviated from the capital plan that went out. So you've got almost $4.8 million worth of capital spending going out with 413 in admin. And you can see some of the big projects, meter replacement of $1 million, PFAS studies, 270,000, well improvements, 180,000. Then add up to that, the annual projects were $2.5 million. What's in the forecast is what was in the budget. Oh, actually, the budget of last year. So we were down a little bit from what we budgeted a year ago, and that was up from the previous years. This is the graph that she was talking about that shows the steady increase in rates of total fund revenue. You can see some of the drivers in terms of the 2025 budget. You see primary driver is this purchase of services, which is basically the strategic imperatives. Not much in the way of growth in materials and services, not much in interest expense because we're not borrowing, and capital's going down, so that helped a little bit. Okay. Wastewater increase of 7.63% to 2024 forecast. Inflation impact as well, 2.5%. Their portion, this fund's portion of the strategic initiatives is a cost increase of almost 800,000. They're getting a proportional share of labor cost increases for wage increases and benefits. Capital budget is 18.2. This will require $14.9 million of new borrowing. The funding from rates and cash reserves will be 3.3. New debt service will amount to $1.2 million. In terms of the revenues, well, the signatory rates are still being reviewed. We don't build any volume into the budget. It's more driven by the signatory flows and loads anyway. So signatory rates will be impacted by capital expenses and city division pass through. We targeted net zero. We actually are getting a little bit more than zero, so I'm not going back to lower anything. All other key metrics are better than internal targets. Look at the numbers. You can see the net cash flow 1.1, actually $1,112, not million, Operating ratio is 0.93. This is another one. This is another year. This year we had budgeted less than one. We're doing the same thing in this fund this year as well. That's my only angst. Debt service coverage ratio with the borrowing drops to 2.56, which is still above our target. Capital coverage ratio, well, that's small. That's why we need to borrow. We're still at 238 days of unrestricted cash on hand, and we have almost $7 million worth of unrestricted investment balances in this fund. Again, $22.23 million of revenue, 17 million, almost 17 million in operating expenses. So we have available debt service 5.6 million, and debt service is only 2.2 million in this fund, leaving 3.4 million money available for CapEx. This is when we get into the operating stuff. Again, this fund had a little bit more in terms of negative cash operating expense growth compared to forecast and budget, even on a real basis. So take a look. Inflation, you can see that we're 1.7 million unfavorable to forecast, 1.6 to forecast, $440,000 is attributable to inflation. So that leaves us with a volume variance of 1.3 and 1.2 respectively against forecast and budget. Taking away the strategic imperatives still leaves us with a negative amount on 464 against forecast and 391 against the prior year budget. And this fund gets nailed for a little bit more of the proportional share of all of the strategic imperatives. So that's kind of hit the unfavorable button here. Capital, total of 18.2 million. They're getting some share of admin, $1.8 million on spending in the satellite systems. $10.6 million related to the wastewater treatment plant. That includes $600,000 of improvements, the water treatment plant upgrade study of $4 million, and $6 million worth of critical asset upgrades. And I think the annual projects are almost 900,000. Yeah. Again, the graph, you can see the primary driver of everything in the 2025 budget is the capital expenditure number jumping up. Personnel costs a little bit. We're also getting higher purchases of services, again, related to the strategic imperatives. Not much in the way of material and supplies growth. Most of it is on the capital side. City division operating expenses are going up 5.87 to forecast with an inflation impact of 2.5. Strategic initiatives hits this fund for 1.2 million. Also get proportional share of labor and benefit increases. Capital budget $56.3 million, and that is per capital plan. 2024 borrowing will be around 18 million. So how we're going to end up is 15 million of funding from grants as well, and another $23.3 million coming from current rates and reserves. Lease rates will be affected overall about 6.3%, and that's by agreement. Capital charges are going to be determined yet. Signatory revenues still being reviewed. Cash flow will be negative due to using up funds from previous borrowings. And so actually, we're just a little bit higher in terms of what we looked at with the cap plan on the negative side. And that's because we had taken in the $56 million. So as you look over a period of time, you'll be on the positive side for a 3-year period. All other metrics better than targets. This is what it looks like. See the net cash flow, $21.6 million. Well, all you need to do is look to the right, see, but you're for almost $46 million to go to in 2024. So looking at the metrics, 1.74 operating ratio, that's good. Debt service coverage is good, 2.03. Capital coverage, well, you have a lot of capital going out the door. So we're a little bit better than half. And days cash on hand will be 607 days. So $63 million worth of revenues is what we're budgeting. Almost 26 million in expenses. There's about 16 million of non-operating revenue stuff that includes the grants of 15 million. So we have almost $52.5 million available for debt service. In debt service will be $17.8 million, leaving almost $35 million for the capital of $56.3 million. Operating expense wise, $2 million negative against forecast, 1.9 against budget. However, look, the inflation effect is almost 923,000, still leaving on a net about 1.1 million against forecast and 943,000 against budget. However, this fund has about $1.3 million worth of strategic effect. So again, once you take that out of the picture, they actually on a year-to-year basis spending a little bit less, 146,000 and $293,000 less than budget. So,
Can I ask a quick question? What depreciation and amortization, what does that exactly mean?
Depreciation and amortization. So that would be taking the useful life of your fixed asset and amortizing that useful life for that useful life, the original cost of the asset. So it's a non-cash item. Yeah. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yeah, I just was, like, all those other ones are real expenses, so I was just.
Yeah, a non-cash item really isn't gonna have an inflation effect, so,
Okay.
yeah. Capital, on the water side, almost $31 million. You can see a big chunk coming from lead service line replacements, water main replacements, $5 million. $2 million worth of non-CCRC projects and about $2.6 million of annual projects to get to almost 31 million. On the wastewater side, you are at $25 million with a chunk coming from major capital improvements, electric substations, clarifier improvements, I&I source reduction of $8 million. And then up above the non-CCRC worth $1.4 million and $2.7 million worth of annual. So altogether, $56.3 million. Pretty much the same story as wastewater. You can see the rate impacts over the years, and primary driver of this graph is certainly the capital expense. That's as high as I remember. So what do we look like in total? LCA, we're going to have $24.4 million of income. Suburban water will be positive. I don't know why I have $1.7 million negative. Again, I got cross-eyed when we did this on Thursday. I suppose, because that's a positive number. So and $23 million on the city side. Cash flows wise, 400,000, we use in reserves on water, wastewater, small amount, 112, and city division, the 21.6 million, loss for the cash flows. Debt service coverage ratio are good, and capital spending, you can see we're spending in total almost $79 million. Capital spending across the entire business. So work left. So we have some signatory numbers to sort through on the suburban sides, the city side. I think we kind of settled some of the questions. Yes, on the headcount stuff. So I can roll with that. And next would be the rate calculations for suburban water and city division. We'll also do the signatory charge report for wastewater. We do have 2 more meetings coming up. One will be a more hearty discussion, review of rates. Then approval on the 28th and rate adoption on the 11th at that meeting.
Can you go back to the one slide for suburban wastewater, the last slide in it? There was a $4 million study.
I can clarify
Top of
that.
that.
That's just,
Water treatment plant.
it's just mistitled. It should say critical upgrade project. That's, and I'm going to talk about that.
Different than critical asset upgrades.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, so it's not a study.
No,
not a study.
it's not a study. It's a construction project.
Okay.
The critical asset upgrade is for upgrades to the existing plant. 4 million is for upgrade and replace design work for upgrade and replacement of the pretreatment plant.
Okay.
These are all pretreatment plant projects.
Yeah, I just saw the study.
Yeah, the study should be there.
All right. Good.
Nope. That's
So I'm assuming that I'm correct, that what we said we were gonna leave in the budget is still in the budgets, that we can roll forward.
we'll talk after this meeting to review the staffing changes, because I think there's some adjustments. we'll
Some
make
adjustments, okay.
Based on today's.
That's fine, I just, want to start getting the book out.
So we would like to send out prior to the next meeting, an actual paper budget for you to have. The actual budget presentations are good, but a little more detail in the package to get to you. So that when we come back on October 14th, you will have that and we'll go through that plus look at rates in more detail.
Okay, any questions? I just wanted to acknowledge that you guys do a fantastic job knowing the business and presenting it, and not questioning so much your judgment, but we're just trying to represent the ratepayers and trying to figure out a way to keep the rates as low as possible. So, but great job of the presentation and knowledge of the system. So, and working.
Thank you. We really appreciate the discussion too. It's helpful to us.
Okay, we're done with that topic.
Yes. For now.
Okay, real quick one then, probably LCA pension plan. Mandatory municipal obligation, it's the information. On the green document, digital board packet pages 19 to 20.
This is an annual notice that we have to provide. I'm happy to have Ed answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm sitting here going, I'm not shocked by this because I actually reviewed all the calculations last week.
Mhm.
Oh, that's going in the board. So this is pretty much the typical minimum obligation required that PMRS sets to us based on the calculations of the costs of 1%, the cost to administer, and any cost to bridge the gap between being unfunded to the obligation. So they amortize that, and which I think is a good thing.
The 2.3 million seems like a higher number than normal. It was always a, but 1.5.
It's actually, I think it was, 2.0 last year.
It's up a little bit, partly because of estimated payroll numbers being higher.
Your payroll's up, yeah, and plus I believe the unfunded portion rose a little bit based on economics of the marketplace, 2024. So there's a little bit more to bridge.
All right, thank you. I don't think there's any discussion required of the standard calculation. All right, moving on, next topic, we have nothing underwater, we have 2 under wastewater. The first one is the pretreatment plant, near-term facility upgrades, final clarification, firefighter rehabilitation, seeking approval. Purple document in our board package, digital board package pages 21 to 29.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Thanks, Liesl. From the one slide that Ed was talking about, with all the line items for suburban wastewater, this is the $4 million line item. And what it is, it's a critical plant upgrade project that the board authorized for AECom to design in May of this year. So we are partitioning the final clarifier work out in the interest of fast tracking it for this high risk item. So in November of 2023, our plant operator Jacobs took the final clarifier down for 2 days, one of the final clarifiers, to inspect it. And we had the manufacturer representative there on site, and they did a condition assessment of the mechanical equipment and determined that it was at the end of its useful life. And it is a high risk component. The consequence of failure for that equipment is basically a loss of solids down to Klein's Island and potential compliance violations at Klein's Island if this equipment fails. So we decided to separate this project out from the other critical upgrades at the plant that AECom is designing, and to pursue the CoStars program for authorization, for solicitation of proposals and authorization of this project. So we contacted 2 vendors that specialize in wastewater equipment for quotes to furnish and install the equipment. One of them is Iron Horse Environmental, and they would propose on Evoqua equipment, and the other is Sherwood Logan proposing on Clearstream equipment. We received 2 proposals. They were very close in cost, both proposing the same installation contractor, who we are familiar with. It's a very reputable contractor. They're currently constructing the water plant filter upgrade project in the city. And they previously completed a mechanical screen project at the pretreatment plant and did an excellent job. So we received those 2 proposals. We're recommending that we go with Iron Horse for reason of cost and also the technology. We like the Evoqua technology. Evoqua is an international company specializing in wastewater equipment. We have a lot of Evoqua equipment at our various installations, and the vendor seemed to have a real understanding of the existing conditions and construction issues. And we thought their proposal was very comprehensive, and so we are recommending that we go with the Iron Horse Environmental and the Evoqua equipment. What else can I say about this? The other projects we're going to do, the other critical pretreatment plant projects, they consist of HVAC improvements in the solids building, aeration deck improvements, cryogenic plant improvements, and some other miscellaneous improvements just to maintain the level of service at the pretreatment plant and get us 5 to 10 years of operation before any major changes driven by Act 537 need to be constructed. So this is basically to maintain the level of service at the pretreatment plant. It's the largest project we've done there since we built the flow equalization basin, but it's basically asset management driven. So we think the prices are very, very economical. Engineer's estimate was 2.4 million. So this comes in well under the engineer's estimate. And I'm asking that the board approve capital project authorization in the amount of $1,859,600. And that includes the AECOM construction phase engineering and also some allowances for staff and contingencies. Any
Okay.
questions?
Questions?
We need to go, is that coming from reserve capital that we have for pre-treatment plant, or we have to go talk to the 5 major users because the majority of this cost is going to go to them, correct?
Okay, and you want to speak to how you're planning to fund this one?
You're talking about the pre-treatment plant critical path items?
Yeah.
Okay, which this is, okay. So the way that I'm budgeting it, the way I looked at it I have to sort of communicate now that I'm looking to, when we did the budget for 2024 in suburban wastewater, we said we were going to borrow $70 million. We have not borrowed yet, and quite frankly, we need to borrow. So the intent right now would be to go out and secure $5 million worth of borrowing against that fund based on 2024 activity. I'm also looking to go out and borrow $6 million, which is related to the pre-treatment plant stuff now, the critical path stuff. So the intent would be to borrow that $6 million, hopefully be able to charge that to the industries on a debt service basis. What I'm using as a safeguard a little bit is if you looked at the schedule, I had $6.9 million worth of invested reserves. In the absence of a set of agreements from the businesses to pay for $700,000 a year in debt service over 30 years, I have the ability to hold that reserves and do a bank loan. So if we do a bank loan, they're willing to say that as long as we have $7 million sitting in invested reserves, which is available to us, but that there's some safeguard against our ability to pay until we get the agreements.
So essentially, we have the ability to borrow it based on current financial capacity to borrow, but we're having these individual conversations kind of simultaneously or in parallel with the industries to secure the agreements.
Just from my understanding, so 90% of the usage for pre-treatment plant is from these 5 customers, is that correct? So if they don't pony up the money.
Well, they will. They will, because we have the capacity to charge them through surcharges. So we do have the ability to capture it. It's just the relationship directly with them at this point. Right now, it's through the township. So the township has to be part of that conversation, accept the pass through and charge it back to the industries. That's kind of the current way to do it. We're trying to redo those relationships so we have a more direct ability to charge directly to the industry.
So if pre-treatment plan, just assumption, is not going to exist in 2 years. So can we recoup this money within 2 years from these 5 customers?
Probably not the full 6 million, no.
Yeah, I'm just worried about, we always talk that pre-treatment plan, we're not going to borrow money, we're not going to give it to other people, they have to stand on their own. I'm just not, feeling comfortable. I do recognize the work has to be done, don't take me wrong. I'm just want to make sure that we are not stuck with the bill 2 years down the road, that we have to pass it on to other customers.
The other thing that we have built into the program or the plan anyway is to maximize hauler revenue, which will be able to cover a pretty decent portion of the debt service on this upgrade as well. Because we're currently receiving about $3 million a year in hauler revenue. We think that can be increased. I thought I saw we increased it by a pretty significant amount in 2025.
Yeah, it can be, and quite frankly, that makes about a net of $1 million cash flow. So I didn't consider that, but it can be considered because that's money to the fund. Yeah, I can't say that I'm warm and fuzzy with all of this because we don't have an agreement. My concern is that I have to do something. We have to do something now to make sure that the facility works. And the only thing I can do to minimize the impact is do it on a debt service basis because that gives me a period of time to see what kind of agreements we can get back in place. And we also have some invested reserve. Now, I'm not liking to want to use them, but can. And the hope would be that somewhere along the line, we get some type of agreement in place from whoever's left and whoever might be going away, that they're going to cover some portion of it.
Hasn't that been the model forever though for suburban wastewater? Like at Sand Spring, if we spend $3 million, we're not charging the 500 customers that $3 million of debt service, right? So this kind of has been spread out in that fund for all the treatment needs. I get your point, it's the industries, but I mean, that's kind of been the model. Am I right on that?
The pretreatment plant is more of a standalone financial entity
Okay.
versus the rest of the system that's more common rate based. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot more segregation on the
Other
pre-treatments.
areas, okay.
Yeah.
That has to do with the intermunicipal agreements and the agreement with Boston Beer. But there is some upside potential for the waste hauler program to be expanded to cover a portion of this debt service, as well as the new agreements that we'll have. We have a strong relationship with Upper Macungie Township as well. They're at the table trying to help us figure out what those future agreements will look like. So.
And my only concern is that whoever uses it have to pay, right? So we just want to make sure that we don't get stuck with the cost. That's my only concern. Otherwise, a program has to go. There's absolutely no question about it. And as long as I have your words that we're not going to, divvy up the cost to other customers and it's going to go to the people we use, I'm okay with this project.
No, in some way, shape, or form, we have to get it from the businesses that are part of that whole process.
Okay.
But I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag a little bit. I'll be coming to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board questions? Okay, we have before us a suburban division pretreatment plant, near-term facility upgrades, final clarifier rehabilitation construction phase, capital project authorization construction phase for $1,859,600. That includes a general construction contract to Iron Horse Environmental LLC for $1,680,000 and a professional services authorization construction phase engineering services to AECOM for $49,600.
I'll make a motion.
Motion.
I'll
by-
second.
Seconded by Norman. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay. Next project is the Allentown Division, Cycle 1 manhole rehabilitation. Seeking approval, yellow documents in the board package, digital board packet pages 30 to 37.
Thanks, Leo. Matt Dorner is going to present this project. I will just introduce it. This is the first cycle of an annual manhole rehabilitation project in the city, driven by the Act 537 plan. There's over 7,000 manholes in the city, and we are to inspect and rehabilitate where necessary manholes in order to reduce inflow and infiltration. So this is the first cycle. It's basically a pilot project to try various approaches and see what works best for the remaining cycles of the project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Chuck. So right now we're going to be inspecting all of the manholes in the city of Allentown. We're into that project right now. We've done about 2,000 manholes so far, and our next step would be this pilot project for starting a 10-year program of rehabilitating those manholes in various ways. We're using the inspection results to come up with ways of rehabilitating those manholes. This project, we're going to do 256 manholes, and being a pilot, these are spread all over the city of Allentown to cover a lot of different situations, and we're doing quite a variety of different types of repairs and rehabilitations. We're going to keep an eye on these and see what works best. But this covers a lot of different things, from putting pans in there in different ways, with gaskets, with grout, various methods of we'll be caulking the manholes, fiber reinforced cement lining, epoxy lining, injection grouting, urethane grouting. I said quite a variety of different types of repairs. So for the next projects in this 10-year cycle, we'll use this to see what works best, what's easiest for our staff to maintain in the future. So this will give us a lot of information on what's the best approach for future projects. So this project will be completed probably in the summer of 2025. Because it's so spread out and so many different types of repairs, it's going to take a little while, more than just having a contractor do the same thing over and over. This is a little different, but that's why it's the pilot, and will point us in a good direction for future rehabilitation projects. Arcadis will be doing the inspection. They did design work on this project as well. I think that's generally what we're looking at, is that pilot is the first of 10-year projects.
Mm-hmm. So we're asking for a capital project authorization in the amount of $1,561,020. That's 25. Sorry, I forgot my glasses. And that consists of construction contract Triangle Contracting LLC for roughly 1.2 million, and then construction inspection services to Arcadis for 271,000, and then allowances for staffing contingency. And regarding the contractor, we've not worked with this contractor before, but we did reference checks on this contractor, and they are experienced. They specialize in this type of work, and they've got good references. So we feel it's a decent proposal. We only had 2 bidders, so their bid was significantly lower. So we're asking for authorization, including the construction contract to Triangle.
And we felt like because there's so many different types of repairs, that's probably why we didn't have as many contractors bidding, because not a lot of them can do all these different types of things.
Questions?
Just so I understand, so you have a list of manholes, and then for each manhole, you have certain repairs that are kind of checked off for each one. So there might be 5 different things that one manhole gets, the next one maybe just gets a new frame and cover or something. It's all set up all throughout.
Yes, there's a schedule for
all of that.
prescribed repair at each manhole.
Okay, interesting.
All 2,000?
240.
Okay, just the ones that you've gone through.
Yeah, 200 project.
Not all need repair, but majority do.
Other questions? What comes to my mind is we've been doing manhole repairs for a long time. Why do we need to study different techniques that, can be applied to these manholes? And if you do 7 different ones and 6 failed, we have to go back and do 6 repairs. Is it the right way or a different way?
Well, I mean, we don't believe that they'll necessarily fail, but some will certainly perform better than others. And like I said, based on the inspections we did, the 2,000 inspections, there's various situations that call for different types of rehabilitation work, depending on the situation. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Just we think we know which are best, but we're for this project trying to do as many as we can to get a good look at everything.
If I could just add to that a little bit, I think that this is a really important project, not just for us, but for the region, because we've had so much collaboration with the other municipalities about proper inspection protocols and trying to come up with the same way of inspecting manholes and coming up with SOPs on how we're all going to repair manholes to achieve results that we're looking for with the inflow problem, which is a manhole problem. So we have a number of municipalities that are looking at this project for guidance on how they're going to manage their own programs as well. So having the variety of techniques and technologies is going to be helpful for not just for us, but for those municipalities that are still trying to learn their way through some of this stuff.
I think I would add too, I mean, it also depends, and I'm guessing, if you have a concrete manhole, there's some repairs. If you have a brick manhole, there's another set of repairs. So sure, there's some differences there that you might have, the frame and cover stuff is pretty standard. But once you get, so there could be other different tech. I'll let you guys jump in on that.
Right, I just want to follow up what you said about repairs in the past. Yeah, so all throughout the AO, the city committed to putting the inflow dishes in. And that was, the thought was, well, that's sufficient, but when it turns out that's not sufficient. As soon as you put the dish in, if it's not all the dirt around, it's not removed. The water just gets underneath, every time it rains, it just pours right in. So the repairs in the past, the intent was there, but it was not executed properly. And so that's the city situation.
My lack of knowledge again. It just seems like you should be able to look at, it's been inspected, you should be able to look at it and say, here's the different techniques that are available to us. Use this one. Layman's terms, okay?
Brian, I'm sorry, I have a question. I mean, it sounds to me as if we're working in a vacuum here. Don't we know what Northampton County is doing or Berks County? Rather than, starting from zero, why don't we just ask our local, counties that, are close to us what they're doing? I mean, why are we starting from scratch?
I don't think that we're starting from scratch, Norma. I think we have a lot of history of doing a lot of work and not necessarily getting the results that we're looking for. And we've talked with a lot of neighboring utilities. Arcadis has worked with cities all across the country, and they know different things work in different situations. And what we're trying to do is to build a really solid SOP for different kinds of repairs in different situations that we can really then deploy for the next 10 years and help the other municipalities. We also need to be cognizant, part of the issue that Phil mentioned about the manhole dishes and the inserts being placed in the manholes. Well, that works for, until the first time someone from operations has to lift that dish out and do maintenance on the manhole, and they don't reseal it the proper way. So looking at different ways to do that sealing and then writing the SOPs, working with operations who's going to maintain these projects moving forward. So we pick we pick technologies that are easiest to maintain going forward. There's just a lot to it. But the technologies that Arcadis has listed, the 9 different things, these are all tried and true technologies. They're not new. It's just trying to look at the right fit for the right application for our systems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so by doing this, spending $1.561 million, we'll learn how to do it more effectively and efficiently in the future and be able to transfer that knowledge to the surrounding municipalities.
And future projects, we can sort of specialize in certain, these manholes, let's do this repair and have a contractor focus on that. That could be certainly cheaper. But for this first pilot, we want to take a look at a lot of different methods. So it'll be more efficient in future projects.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, any other questions from the board? All right, we have before us the Allentown Division Cycle 1 Manhole Rehabilitation Project Construction Phase, Capital Project Authorization, construction phase of $1,561,025. That includes a general construction contract to Triangle Contracting LLC for $1,230,025 and a professional services authorization to Arcadis for $271,000. I need a motion and a second. Motion by Amir.
Second.
Second.
I got Norma on second there. Amir and Norma. Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, Matt. Chuck. All right, next on the agenda. Monthly financial review.
Okay.
Lightning round?
Fast?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Very fast.
Footnotes version?
We can do that. So we're gonna take a look at how we did in August. Let's start with the month. Suburban Water was positive in terms of income. Suburban Wastewater went negative. City Division was positive, overall positive. Compared to forecast, not that bad, just off a little bit of water, and the other 2 were in good shape compared to forecast. So cash flows, good, all 3 are positive. Suburban Water was a little bit below forecast in terms of cash flow. Suburban Wastewater was good and City Division was good for the month. So where are we year to date? Positive on the water side for income. Wastewater is a little bit negative. City's looking good in terms of net income compared to forecast. I'm pretty happy to say all 3 are positive. So the business itself is positive. In terms of income on the cash flow side, Suburban Water is positive. Wastewater is negative. City Division is up a lot, mostly because of the borrowing. Compared to forecast, water's down a little bit. Wastewater is up. City Division is up. Full year, the only thing that I did in terms of forecast was got a good look at the capital works forecast, incorporated all of their numbers into it, and actually didn't change the income statement at all. It was more a change to cash flow statements as a result of capital being a little bit lower than what we had budgeted, which was what we were carrying as forecast. So on the cash flow side, full year or income were positive in water, negative in wastewater. We've been talking about being negative in wastewater. City Division is good. Compared to forecast, though, water's good, wastewater is good, city is unfavorable, attributable to the higher loan costs on the 56 million. So cash flow were positive across the board, and against budget were positive across the board as well. So we want to go to the points. instead of going through each one. You know what I was gonna say, let's stop at the metrics. I think it's good. The debt service, we're at 2.29 in suburban water versus the budget that we have of 1.96 and target of 1.20, so that's good. Operating ratio is up to our budget target and also internal target. In days cash on hand is 413.9 days, that's good. Then we can skip to suburban wastewater metrics. Debt service on wastewater is 5.74. That's good with respect to budget, good with respect to target. Operating ratio, we budgeted less than one, we're at less than one, although actually it's a little bit better than what we budgeted. So I guess that's good news. And in days cash on hand, we're at 220, which is good as well. City division, debt service coverage ratio is 2.19. Again, we're beating the budget, we're beating target. Operating ratio is good, beating budget and target again. And 350.7 days cash on hand right now is good as well. So we'll get to the scorecard. You like the scorecard? Pretty much on the suburban water side, 13 out of 14. The only thing that was off was not as good to forecast, but it wasn't by a lot. So pretty happy with that one. Suburban wastewater, we're 11 out of 14. Net income was not zero, it was on the negative side. Cash flow resultingly was on the negative side as well. And well, the operating ratio was budgeted that way. So that's going to be read pretty much unless we have some kind of number that jumps out at us. But not bad. And then on the city side, the only thing that's off is the net income, better than budget because of the loan costs. So we're at 13. So there was nothing in the entire month of August that made me squirm, be worried. So we'll see what takes place in September. We did incorporate, like I said, the change to the capital forecast. It's a little bit less than what we had. So again, on the summary side, nothing alarming. We did update the forecast. Invested balances still help. Rates are still up. I don't know how much still changed since the Fed did their thing. So, and underlying metrics actually look good for all three funds. So I'm pretty happy with where we were in August. How's that for fast?
That's pretty good. All right, next on the agenda, monthly system. Any questions for Ed? All right. Monthly system operations overview. White pages in our board packet, pages 51 to 53. Digital board package.
All right. And in front of you, you do have the August 2024 operations report. In August, there was one reportable safety incident and one non-reportable. The non-reportable was an employee backing into a telephone pole. And the reportable was an eye incident where an employee was plunging a sampling sink. Some of the material splashed up into his eye. And yeah, they get flushed out and go to the doctor. We don't typically require safety glasses in that area. It's not really an area that has splashing incidents. It's more of a freak occurrence, and he actually does wear eyeglasses routinely, so I don't really have an explanation of how that happened. Flipping over to the next page, the water production and wastewater treatment was relatively consistent with this time of the year. We did receive a total of 5.63 inches of rain in August. We did not have any bypasses that occurred due to rain though. We did have one bypass, and that occurred August 11th. It was from about 7:18 to 10 p.m. And the bypass was approximately 126,230 gallons. We did lose half of the plant's power at that time, a little bit before that, I guess I should say. One of the transformers at the plant went down. When that occurred, we lost half of the pumping at the facility. And we also lost SCADA. So there were some difficulties with trying to regain power and getting the transformer back up and running, and along with the other MCCs. And when you're doing it blind and not having SCADA to be able to see which pumps are actually running, it made it even more complicated. By the time they were able to get pumping restored, the bypass has already occurred. The times that I gave you, it was not bypassing the total time, it was intermittent as pumps were coming on and off. Other than that, there was one main break in Allentown and two in the suburban division. And the one injury accident, which I already touched on. Flipping over to the third page, as noted, there was the one bypass in Allentown. Other than that, the only permit exceedances were at Sand Spring. There was a total of 6 this month, well, August. I just want to make note that this was really in preparation for the upgrade that is actually occurring as we speak. So we had to knock down some of the mixed liquor, take down some of the tanks in order to get everything prepared for the construction to actually occur, which started beginning of this month, late last month. So everything should be wrapping up in a very, very near term. So once that's operational, it's going to take probably 2 weeks or so to get the biomass accumulated. But after that, I'm hoping smooth sailing from here on out. Other than that, I don't have anything. If you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Is there, on the equipment going to ground, the treatment plant, loss of SCADA and that stuff, has there been any adjustments to equipment, operations, performance, whatever to prevent something like that happening? That's pretty significant when you lose SCADA and you're operating blind, I guess.
Yes, yeah, it's quite challenging. Whenever we have incidents like this, we sort of sit down and review everything that did occur. It can be difficult to recount everyone's moves, basically. You have operators running into the MCC rooms, they're flipping disc breakers, and someone has to be there to really make sure we document everything that that happened, so that when things like this do happen, we can try to correct it. The problem is they're never the same. It can be something anywhere on the plant that causes one of the transformers to trip out or one of the breakers to trip out, and it can be difficult to prevent it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff comments?
I have just a couple things. First, a point of order and a question for the solicitor. Throughout the course of this meeting, we lost Linda, Sean, and Ted at undisclosed times. So we currently do not have a quorum. We'll have to go back and check the timestamp of when Ted and Sean left, really, as it relates to the last two action items.
Sean left at 2:16.
Yeah. I've got that, and Linda,
And then it was like 1:59. I didn't catch the others.
and so it's really Ted. We can find out through Zoom when Ted left, but just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention that if we did not have a quorum when we took those votes, we will need to bring them back.
You won't be able to adjourn either.
Well, there's an easy way to adjourn is head to the door. Yeah, and so that was just one point of order I wanted to raise. I also wanted to acknowledge Chris Mon and Sue Sampson, who gave great presentations, so I hear, at the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association meeting last week. I was not able to be there. Chris did a presentation on our lead program, and Sue gave a presentation on digital communications that we're doing here at LCA. So, but I heard they were both excellent. This afternoon, I'll be presenting to the Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce Board of Governors meeting. So I just wanted to let you know about that outreach opportunity. And then finally, this will come to you by email. Look for it in your inboxes, but we do have open houses scheduled now for the month of October for the Kleins Island Sewer System Regional Sewer Plan. They are 6 different dates from October 17th through the 29th. couple Saturdays, mornings in there, mostly Tuesday and Thursday evenings, so you have your choice, but would love to see some board representation at some of those events. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Solicitor comment.
No comments, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Kevin. Public comments on any topics whatsoever?
No, thanks, Brian.
No comments, thanks.
Thanks, Jenny and Brian. Board comments?
Get from appraisal to value for the house.
Yes, I think those appraisals have come in recently.
Governance committee, any progress on that?
We have a governance committee schedule, a meeting scheduled for October the 2nd. Did I get that right? I don't, no, you're not. It's not you. It's Ted, Linda, and Sean.
Okay.
October 2nd.
Okay, good. Thank you. No need for executive sessions. Seeing no further items on the agenda, we are adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.